Ban Ki-moon has said, I think, a number of times he plans to return home to Korea around mid-January, but he will be, the Secretary General will be in the residence until the end of his tenure. Mr. Lee.
Sure.
And then I have some things I've been asked to announce, but go ahead.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, there are reports that in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the FARDC engaged with and fired on and killed some Burundian soldiers who had crossed in. And since there's a $1 billion peacekeeping mission there, does the UN have any information
I'm
on
aware that the peacekeeping mission and its costs, I just have not received an update here from them. It doesn't mean that they're not aware, or just means I have not been given an update.
Sure. I've also seen, and I guess this is sort of the Ban Ki-moon on his way out. I saw a report by the presidency of Sri Lanka saying that he'd gotten a call from Ban Ki-moon. Their readout is one of extensive praise. And I wanted to know, is this true? Is the Secretary General calling various heads of state? And if so, specifically in the case of Sri Lanka, was there anything discussed about accountability and the issues that have arisen since 2009?
The Secretary General has been making a number of calls to heads of states, basically saying goodbye. Mr. Lee.
Thanks a lot. I want to ask on Myanmar, which continues to be reports of killing in Rakhine State and the border closed. The Myanmar news agency, the state agency of the government, has said, headline, journalists impressed with extensive media access in Rakhine State. And I wanted to know, there was an announcement that some media were taken there and others were banned from going, but I wanted to know, what is the UN's understanding of media access to Rakhine State and other conflict zones in Myanmar?
I don't have any details of what exactly, we're not monitoring the media access. Obviously, we remain very concerned by the situation in Rakhine State. We do note that there's been some improved humanitarian access following the discussions between the government and the UN team. Some health clinics were reopened, and we're following, obviously, focused on the humanitarian access, but as I said, I don't have any independent confirmation of the kind of media access that there is.
I wanted to ask you some kind of, I guess, closeout questions. One had to do with I know I've asked you this before, but the Secretary General's brother, Ban Ki-ho, I put in writing and in this room just factual questions, whether in fact he remains mining in the country through Bosung Power Tech. And I'm wondering, since having sent them to you, some of the links went offline, have you been able in these months, or will you before his term ends?
My understanding is that his brother no longer works for this company. I don't have any other details.
Okay, and I wanted to ask also on the review of Saudi Arabia being taken off the Children Armed Conflict list. Where does it, as his term or at least these briefings end? Where does the process stand in terms of evaluating? Since I don't know if you were here that day, but the Saudi Arabia has admitted using cluster bombs now. So where does it, between now and the 31st,
obviously the process continues. All the open files were shared with the incoming team. We will, and I think what is very important to remember is that all the incidents that have happened in Yemen from last spring will obviously be reflected in the next report of the Office of the Children Armed Conflict.
And as I'm sure you know, as the Fifth Committee winds down, Burundi is one issue, but there are other mandates of human rights rapporteur mandates that are the budget's being questioned. In the case of Burundi, it's about actually deploying beyond the capital. Is the Secretariat, I understand it's up to the Fifth Committee, but given the Secretary General what he said about Burundi, is there going to be an attempt by him before they vote on this budget to make sure that
obviously, the budget is an issue for member states to discuss. We would hope that member states continue to support the efforts of the UN on the ground and obviously its human rights component.
Have you seen I guess, as his time expires, anyway, the DPRK has said, this is their quote, they've called the Secretary General an opportunistic chameleon in the sense of what they see as his run for presidency of South Korea. And I'm just wondering, I mean, it seems like, I'm sure you've seen the coverage, and I know that you've been very careful in saying how the room was used that day, but most media are saying that this was a strong hint that he's running. There's a lot of things going on. What does he think of this important on the Korean Peninsula country?
I think it's not surprising that the Secretary General's comments have created a buzz. I think the Secretary General was very clear. He will go back to Republic of Korea as Ban Ki-moon in mid-January, consult, and then make decisions.
In the car, you remember, you were here or I think you were a spokesman, when the South Korean mission gave the Hyundai. Does this remain with the UN? Is that going to be the vehicle of Mr. Guterres, or what happens with it?
No, my understanding is that that car is no longer in service.
And
Thank
this
you.
house, has he moved out of the house? Has
No,
he moved?
not yet.